Hello, everybody, and welcome to our third session of today's Training Industry Learning Tech Showcase, AI-driven authoring tools, sponsored by Camtasia, FlowSparks, Guide is Easy, and IMC. And I am Liz Spate, the Events Marketing Specialist here at Training Industry, and I'm thrilled to have you with us here today. Before we get started, again, would like to go over a few housekeeping items to help you interact with our speaker and get the most out of this session. So throughout this session, please feel free to use that chat window to interact with our speaker with any comments. But for those questions, please submit all those questions to the Q&A section on your toolbar below. Our speaker and some of our guests here will be addressing those questions throughout the event. And additionally, at your end of your time here with us today, you will notice a short evaluation survey popped open in another tab in your browser, and we would appreciate your thoughts on today's event. And all of our sessions are being recorded and archived on trainingindustry.com, and you will receive a follow-up email from us that will include the link to the on-demand session for your team. If this is your first Training Industry event, we would love to welcome you. We exist to make connections among learning and development professionals, and we offer tons of resources to support your role in L&D, like live events like today's Learning Tech Showcase, as well as through articles on our website, our magazine, conferences, research reports, our membership, and our podcast. We would also love to hear about what you learned from today's session on social media, so please follow us on your favorite platform so we can continue that conversation. And without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our third speaker of today. Christophe Jacobs is the Chief Customer Success Officer at FlowSparks. And with that, Christophe, take it away.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this session. Just technically checking if my screen is shared. That is okay, so I can go right ahead. So let's jump in. It's great to be here today. So my name is Christophe Jacobs, and I have been working in learning and development for over a decade, 14 years and counting, where I helped organizations optimize their digital learning strategies. What is my background? Just as a reference point to the point of view that I have today, I hold a master's in educational sciences, so I am not an IT person, but I look at digital learning from an instructional design point of view, hence the title of this session. Of course, I do picked up some technical knowledge along the way, which puts me in a great position to also talk about our product, how it functions, and how it integrates generative AI into its core. So today, it's all about FlowSparks, our authoring platform, and how it unites instructional design and generative AI. Now, before we look at the AI part of FlowSparks, for me, it's very important to frame the core principle behind our authoring tool, because for it to make sense, the AI part, I first need to have a quick look at how our authoring tool functions, because it has a bit of a different logic than many of the other authoring tools that exist out there. As FlowSparks, as an organization, we have made countless of bespoke e-learning projects in the past, using a varied, many different authoring platforms or authoring tools that existed, which led up to us building our own authoring platform. Why did we do that? Because we wanted to have more of a focus in our authoring environment to making sure that learning happens and learning sticks to participants going through an e-learning course. All with an effort to just avoiding that e-learning is merely there to have a content being dumped onto participants, and really make sure that participants engage, they remember, and they of course then apply into the real world later on. As you can see from the slides, framing the entire authoring tool would take too long, but for the core concepts in the authoring tool that are important for us is not only do we support the creation of the e-learning with the authoring tool, but we also support in some organizational factors with our authoring tool, reducing the workload when you need translations, when you need localizations. We also perfectly play well with many different LMS systems, which you can integrate the content into, with an emphasis on having a direct connection between the authoring tool and your LMS system, which means that when you make a change in the authoring tool, it's automatically up to date on the LMS without repackaging and re-uploading course content. But that's not the topic of today. The topic today is AI. I mentioned before, instructional design in the creation part of e-learning within FlowSparks is incredibly important. It's part of its core philosophy. It's part of its core approach. It's what makes it stand out to other authoring tools in the market. And to showcase this very quickly, I wanted to show you the logic behind creating content in FlowSparks. In its core, it allows you to create individual activities that have a intended outcome when you start creating digital self-paced training materials. And as you can see here, 3 of the main categories of stuff that you can build or singular activities that you can build is focused on either information transfer, practicing learning content, or assessment. As with other authoring tools, there is the way that you can create information transfer, whereby the outcome is informing people in an interactive and engaging way. And as an example, there's an activity type that lets you list elements on top of each other in multiple pages that people need to scroll through. Fine, information transfer covered in the system. We also have different ways to tackle information transfer into an activity, whereby it's still engaging course content, interactive buttons you can click and things you can open, but in its essence, it is information that people can consume in an engaging and interactive way. More important, and what's core to FlowSparks as a system and how it ties into the generative AI inclusion in the system later on, is that we have a lot of activities that you can build with the system that are focused on application, that are focused on practicing learning content. As an example, there's an activity that lets you build a little scenario case. Here, a case with there's either an image or a description, and participants need to respond to a central question and get feedback from that. Or if you need a full-blown assessment, the tool also has you covered, like other authoring tools, whereby you can create multiple choice questions and multiple question types, and you can organize them and you can randomize them. So far, looking at FlowSparks, I don't want to make this all about the FlowSparks in its let's say the basic form, because I want to go into the AI part first and foremost. What you see here as what you can build with the system are numerous activities, all focused on a certain outcome that you can reach. And in the categories that you see right in front of you, not dissimilar to other authoring tools. It's sharing information, it's practicing information, and it's checking if we can assess if people have understood something, more like a final test. Now, what makes FlowSparks stand out is that not only do we cover these basic outcomes that any other authoring tool focuses on as well, we go one step further, in the sense that if you have an outcome on the instructional design plan that wants to spike interest of participants before actually diving headfirst into the core content, FlowSparks has a specific recipe to do this under the category of activities that are meant to spike the interest. But maybe more interesting to make learning that sticks is the whole category of activities. You could call them micro-learning activities, but I'm a bit allergic to these types of wording or categorizing learning activities and as a whole, but you could consider them as micro-learning activities, whereby putting knowledge and content in context is much more important, whereby the story-wise will be our main activity that we will focus on in the demonstration of the AI, but it's all about making sure people can apply course content. And there are many more, ranging from self-evaluation to other activity types that are part of the system. So its whole premise of FlowSparks and what makes it stand out and what makes it unique is the fact that you have these activities that have a built-in instructional design recipe. It's not just about an element. It's not just about a hotspot element or a specific question. It's an end-to-end flow within the activity, start, middle, finish, a specific purpose why it exists. It has a recipe that you can use that determines how that activity works. And as an author, you stick to the recipe, you work towards creating e-learning with impact. Of course, with the added value that if you're not an instructional or a seasoned instructional designer yourself, it makes the threshold for creating e-learning with impact, e-learning that has a higher retention rate, easier than if you would start from a blank page, which many other authoring tools force you to do. And of course, in this webinar, I can't see all of your faces, but I imagine some of you are now wondering why I'm not getting to the point and talk about the AI part. Well, we will move on to that in a second, because what FlowSparks has done is it had already the instructional design recipes at its core. And it has now also built the AI Co-Author, which is an extension on FlowSparks where you can leverage AI to complement the existing instructional design logic with the power of generative AI in the activities that exist in the system. So the recipes that we had already in the system joined together with generative AI that could start pre-filling activities with a specific outcome makes it a very powerful mechanic. And I promised you a minute ago we would dive into one of these contextual learning activities to show you how that recipe works and how then AI can be used. So let's do that now as an example. What you see in front of you at this moment is an activity you can build in FlowSparks, one of the many, called the Story Wise. Get wiser by following a story as a participant. And this is an example that has been made by a human. This one exists already for many years. And it tackles the code of conduct in an organization. And through the narrative of, hey, let's look at some scenarios and situations linked to our code of conduct. Let's see how you can behave. We actually consume learning content, but actually engage very deeply with that learning content. The recipe for this instructional design wise goes as follows. I have a title slide, which I can populate with some content and an image. It tackles, or it uses advanced organizers, so pre-loading the brain of the participant with a few key facts and figures in relation to the subject that follows. So we prepare them to actually get content to stick into the short and the long-term memory. That's part of the recipe. And then the core of this activity is all about introducing scenarios whereby we offer this is about to happen or this is happening in the organization, trying to make it very personalized with a storytelling approach. That's why the story wise, get wiser by the story, whereby in this case, I'm invited to go to a conference and the organizer wants me there. They want to pay for me, the hotel, everything. They want to have expenses and everything covered for me. Now, of course, in the company, I have a code of conduct, and the core of this recipe is that you propose a few behaviors that people can select. They're sometimes in a gray area. Some are really bad behaviors, some are really good behaviors, but we ask participants, what would you do? And it's your intention to act according to the code of conduct. And then in the recipe of this activity, there is a feedback tied to every single response and a link to insights, which is then a part of the manual of the code of conduct that people can read in depth on that. So the whole idea of this activity is make people do something with core information that they might already seen. They already read the code of conduct, for example, but now let them apply this into situations that could be realistic enough so they can apply this. This is an example of such an instructional design recipe. And what I wanted to show you at the core of this webinar is how is AI tackling this, or how is AI optimizing my workflow as a creator in the system by using the generative AI powers. When looking at the example, of course, from your gut feeling, you already could imagine that creating such an activity or populating it with some content that makes sense requires a bit of effort. Because creating in itself technically is not that complex. As you see the buildup of the screens, and especially in FlowSparks itself, it's just filling in a form. The bulk of the work is in coming up with the scenario, coming up with the question, coming up with the responses, coming up with the feedback, the learning moments, the remediation information, coming up with all of the good elements that makes learning stick, and especially e-learning, because there's no direct coach involved, e-learning stick with your participants. And that's where AI, and especially the co-author of FlowSparks, comes in. I'm just glancing a little bit to the Q&A section. If there are any answers are popping in, do put the questions in Q&A or in chat. My colleagues could respond, but if questions are unresponded, I could always pick them up during this session. Since there are no open questions, I will move along. So FlowSparks, together with the AI co-author that's part of FlowSparks, what is the, how does it work? What is actually going on when you leverage AI? So when I have FlowSparks open, and FlowSparks is comprised out of a content manager where I manage my content and create my course content, I have access to, in this case, my sandbox environment, a little toolbar, and I can ask to create a new activity inside of the system. As explained before, each activity has a specific outcome. And since I am wise to what I want to create, I want to show the story wise as an element to create into the system. Now in FlowSparks, I can opt to make it manually by just hitting OK. Then I need to populate everything myself, or I go into the AI supported wizard, which will bring me to a 3-steps approach that I can give instructions or fill my core content into the instruction fields so that AI can run with my instructions to create some core content. It is quite a long list of things that I can fill in, but there's only one thing that's mandatory. Only thing that I need to fill in is my subject. So if I just have a subject, and I have some examples later on, and I can show you like how not to make a fool of myself on giving a webinar. That was one of the topics I just generated a few minutes ago. I just have to fill in the subject line, and that's the only thing I fill in. But of course, we are all wise to how AI works a little bit, which means the more you feed it information, the better it will operate. So in the case of the AI co-author, I could fill it in with a subject, target audience, that is my intended target audience, a tone of voice, expertise of the assistants, etc. So the more I fill in, the better the output will be. And in this case, we're making a training for call center operators, how to deal with angry customers by the phone, how to de-escalate situations for call center operators that are working in a shop or online shop that sells gardening equipment. So to make it highly specified to see what the AI does with that. If I go to next, then I have a section in which I could give it some core information. So by itself, AI can search the web for anything that is remotely close to that subject. But if I give it a summary or some learning objectives of myself, or even a document that I have laying around, I could feed that all to the AI, which it can consume, and then it can use to create my activity. And on the activity level itself, I could give it extra instructions. Yeah, make sure that my text have emojis, or keep the reading level at level B1 or whatever reading level you want to have. And I can specify how many facts, how many dilemmas I want to get out of the system. And the system is also capable of generating images using the AI model. If I hit start, the system now is going to do 2 things. It will take the information I gave to FlowSparks about my course content, the subject, etc., my documentation. It will bring together the already present recipe on the instructional design level, because that's what FlowSparks adds to the equation. And it will now send an instruction to the AI model, hey, try and make something out of this, at least a baseline that I can use. In this case, my StoryWise. So it sends some information. It creates the prompt all by itself now, based on my information and the instructional design recipe, and it will give me back output in the system. When I have output, it will create an entire activity by itself, where it takes the normal things that I can add to the system, but then pre-populate it with generative AI content, which means I have a faster content creation. I don't have to do it all by myself. And the thing runs like any other activity StoryWise, which we have seen before. It has made a title. It made an introduction. So with the image generation, it's tried to take into account it's for gardening equipment. It's extremely exaggerated, but at least there's a baseline image that I can use. It has come up with scenarios. It has come up with responses. It gives me a lot of creativity in coming up with these scenarios. Personally, myself, it made every single response, every single feedback, every single insight, everything that could be potentially usable in my training content. It made it, but it also made sure that as a creator, I could go back into the system, and between the tabs, I can find what was the title that it came up with. What was the dilemma, which is comprised out of the scenario, the options, the feedback, the remediation information, and I can scroll through it. So everything is available for me as a creator. And on top of that, I could make changes, of course, but I could also ask it, hey, I need a new scenario here. You made me 3, but I want a 4th one. And when adding something new, it remembers the information that I gave before, and I'll just add in a new subject. In the case here, now there's a customer not calling for himself, but calling for an elderly family member. Wrap that into a new scenario. And when I let it generate, it creates an entirely new picture, a dilemma, description, and it's about that new elderly family member that is there, that has a problem, which I need to de-escalate the situation of an angry son calling for his elderly dad or mom. Not only that, but the AI is also perfectly capable of taking whatever you enter, either yourself or what is AI generated, in this case in my text fields, and you can give it some baseline instructions for adjustments. Summarize this, make bullet points. Not only can it generate content, but also when I introduce content to it by copy pasting or writing something myself, I can optimize whatever is there. So I can give those slight instructions, even down to any instruction that I want to give. So in the case of the facts that I want to give in the beginning, I can give the instruction, hey, make sure your statistics match up with a real world example. And then the text can be generated, which I could add to my current text, or I can replace the text that I currently have in this box. And Liz mentioned to me earlier that there was already a session focusing on translations and on languages. Well, AI is also perfectly capable here to translate the content. So I made this in English, but I could also connect my, let's say, automated translation services, in this case, DeepL or Google Translate via API, to have it translate from English to Dutch and have, in fact, the same activity with the language layer of Dutch superimposed onto it. Which saves me work in the system where I don't need to make a copy of something. It just has language layers that are tied to the core contents, but it translates the content. It keeps the assets the same if I want to, but it just translated this into Dutch, which is comprehensible for me because that's my native language. But assume that this is properly translated, but like everything else with AI, you have to tweak a little bit yourself afterwards. Now, when you look at AI, and especially our AI co-author, but this slide is mostly for AI in general, when using generative AI, as a user, please do enlist the help of AI, because there are some big benefits, which I just mentioned, the speed and the fact that it helps you, but don't expect miracles in the sense that the models keep improving. But we need to take into account a few things like, and this is not only for the AI co-author, but in any authoring tool, AI will give you a proposal. You have to check this and adjust afterwards. I'm very adamant that we have an instructional design-driven platform. I personally expect authors to double check what the AI has spewed out, because you need to double check it. Sometimes it hallucinates or doesn't give factual things that are correct, because it will interpret it, the core data you give it as well, and not always just quote from it or use it directly. What is the greatest added value from AI? For me, it's creativity. Like I mentioned at the beginning, these kinds of activities that gives you a lot of engagement from the participants, a lot of thinking and reasoning that goes into running through such an activity. It helps you as an author to have a help in the AI that gives you the creativity to come up with a scenario, even if it's not 100% okay and that's not 100% correct factually. At least you get some inspiration. Oh, this is a setup, or this is a scene that I could use or reuse. Enormous speed. If I need to do the research manually, AI can do it much faster. A tip when using AI, but I think everybody claims it says the same thing. The smaller of a task you ask it, the better the results would be. If you make it too big, it will do things half and not completely. Same goes for your core content that you give to the AI. If it's unstructured data, if it's like rubbish data, if it's like a PowerPoint with only images in there, it will not yield a good result at the end. So the qualitative the input is, the better the output would be. And the most important one for me then personally is accept that AI is lazy. Like everybody, I was very happy that AI came into our lives. But in itself, AI is very lazy. If you ask it to do 3 things, it will do 1 and then ask, do you need more? That's typically how also ChatGPT works, my experience. What is important as a content creator, what is the role that we see in FlowSparks when using AI, is that the content creator becomes a critical thinker. Look at what it produces, look at what you try to achieve, check if it's in line with what you try to do, make it work in your favor, and don't expect it just to do the role of a content creator. It could do that, but half, and you still need to check it, make sure that it runs alongside so it can improve the rate in which output could be produced. This is, of course, the AI co-author in its, let's say, its glorious form in the demo environment, which I, of course, use, and I'm working for the company, so my word is not 100% objective, but this is running now for some time in our customer base. And when looking at a real-world situation, I have this testimonial of Ashley, which is working for an IT organization spread across all of Europe. They have offices, and she is tasked with creating internal training from internal customers on a wide range of subjects she is not knowledgeable about. What she finds AI does for her, and the AI co-author in FlowSparks along with it, because she uses other AI tools as well, is that she gets a lot of time back when researching topics, because AI does the research for her, the first layer of research validation she needs to do itself. She again acknowledges the boosting creativity. For her, that is very important, but also the new perspectives, looking at a certain training content where she asked, hey, this is information I want to transfer to my audience. AI and FlowSparks gave her 2 proposals on how to make an engaging activity. She never thought of it. AI gives a proposal, she ran with it, and in her surveys, she gets quite big positive results on how engaging the course is in comparison to just an information dump sent across. And she really likes the fact that AI can like spew out 20 questions about a certain subject, which she can read through and then select the 10 most appropriate ones with relevant answers and distractors. And because not everything is always very positive, there are some limitations in using AI for her, but maybe just in general. The AI model used with FlowSparks is DALL-E from OpenAI. There is some image inconsistency that is still tied into that specific model. So inconsistent on style. And on the core content as well, refreshing content, surprising, but she sees some inconsistencies across multiple courses asking the same thing. But for me, that's more linked to AI. That is not an algorithm that's fixed. You get different results every single time you ask it, maybe the same question. But that's for her experiences in using AI. And then finally, the last part of this section, then we can have still a few minutes for questions. What brings AI for FlowSpark specifically? What we have done already, so in preparation for this already, something has been deployed in our products. AI is also perfect to support in accessibility and making sure your content is accessible in the system, like generation of subtitles. We have a translation mechanism in which we have language layers and not duplicates of content. So that means that usually we see people loading up a video in English or in Dutch or in German, have the subtitles run and then translate the subtitles. So perfect for people that have assistive software that uses subtitles to skim through the content, but also for the translation part, perfect. And when you are making content that needs to be accessible, the generation of the alt text for images is also something that AI can support with. And then what holds the future for FlowSparks, it's not a promise, it's just part of what is currently on the expected roadmap, is because we rely so heavily on instructional design, we try to make the threshold even lower for newcomers, new authors to the system, making sure that we support in making conscious decisions on which recipe or which activity type is most suited for part of the core content. And also have a chatbot for support, but that's something that I mistyped on the slide. But for completely the support, have AI supported there as a first-line support in our system. Now, to close off this session, last point to talk about is we also done a case study or a AI performance report, as we call it, by checking if we have a learning developer, which is a seasoned learning developer, seasoned e-learning creator, and we pitch them again another seasoned learning creator that can use AI and the first one can't. What is the outcome? What is the difference that we see here? Are they faster? Or how is the quality perceived? Are they cost effective? So we've checked this with launching 6 different projects. Different people have been involved to check what is the numbers and what's actually factual there as a number to paste on how much faster are you with AI or without AI, of course, done with using FlowSparks as an authoring tool, as the backbone. But it could be interesting for people looking up or wanting to find out more, okay, if you then make real comparisons, because a lot of tools and a lot of suppliers claim 9 times faster, 60 times faster, 200 times faster. What's really faster and what is comprised out of? That's it for my session for now. I'm going to peek over to the chat or the Q&A section, but I don't see any open questions and answers there. And I see a list also popped up to support me, maybe if there were some outstanding questions. I don't see them appearing.
Yes, I was about to say there were a few in chat, and your team has been amazing for addressing a lot of them. But since we do have the time, there were a good question from Michelle that asked, I think, 5. So I don't know if we have time to address all 5, but I thought one that was really good was, does FlowSparks support adaptive learning paths or personalized content recommendations, and how does AI determine those adaptations?
Well, before we had AI, we already had adaptive learning in the system because we have a concept. I'm just going to go left, right, and center. We have a concept in the system, which is a program, which is like I explained that you can make an activity, which is a micro-learning activity. But of course, if you have a longer training track, you want to bring them together. And what you could call a learning journey or a learning path, we call it the program. And one of such programs could be a landing page in which you can go into different activities, which you can open, which you can complete, and then come back. But that program could start with an intake test. And since we're so instructional design driven, even before AI, we had this, there's an algorithm here that the creator can specify. I have some knowledge questions. If you do well, you get exemptions in the whole program. So you don't have to do some content, but it's still there. You can still consume it, but it's not mandated. Based on the intake test, how well you do, you get exemptions. And the logic of our program here is that if you've completed everything, either by exemption or by completing it because you had to complete it, you can start your final test, which is then your benchmark. You can obtain your certificate. That's how we do adaptive learning at this moment, because for the AI part, we have yet to implement a logic which can guarantee that the AI makes good decisions. We've done experiments and AI sometimes makes mistakes, hallucinates, and as perceived for the participant, it was always very negative because why does it have this reasoning and I'm much more knowledgeable than this? So for now, our efforts are stuck in the R&D phase. But this fast lane program, so this learning journey that we have, and we have multiple ones, is mostly suited for, let's say, compliance training. You have to do a biannual training. You know a lot of stuff. Hey, prove it. You can skip it in 15 minutes instead of the 45 or an hour it takes a newcomer into the system. Not AI driven, but with control of the author. And I think in my entire session, that has a bit of the red line. Author needs to be in control. You need to make sure that you know what's going on because FlowSparks is also mainly used for formal training. You need to follow this up. You need to prove to auditors whatever happens in the training. So that's part of its core reasoning as well.
Beautifully said. Well, with that, we are at time. Is there anything else you would like to leave with the audience today before we take our another 15-minute break?
The only thing that's left for me is to, again, point to the QR code if you want to have that report. And if you would have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We are very happy to respond to any questions that you would have.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much, Christophe. This was a wonderful demo, so I really appreciate it. And thank you for all those amazing questions that we had in the chat and also your team as well for addressing those. So thank you. For everyone else, though, like I mentioned, we will be taking about more of a 14-minute break. And up next, we have Stefan Weaver from Is Easy for their session From Overwhelmed to Empowered, Deliver Outstanding Content with AI-Driven Course Creation. So again, in a moment, I will end this session. You can join our next session by returning to the event lobby and going to the session tab. I hope you all stick around for our next session, which will begin soon. Bye, everybody.